Cool. Thank you all for making time today. My name's Chris. With me is Pooja, our Director of Engineering. We're both from a company called Platform 9. We have a long background and heritage in the OpenStack community. I believe back in sort of 2016, we released the first version of OpenStack that we would have called SaaS managed, where we took the OpenStack control plane, put it in the cloud, and delivered it as a managed service out to anyone that wanted to, run OpenStack in their data centers or co-locations. Today we're here to talk about a new open source tool that we've contributed to the community that's called vJailbreak. It's all about migrating VMware VMs in a very simple and scalable way onto any OpenStack. That's our platform and any other OpenStack out there. Please do ask questions as we go along the way. Interactive presentations are a little bit more engaging for everyone here and people watching afterwards as well. So if there's questions, please jump in. I guess I just covered my very first slide. So today what we're going to go through is talk a little bit about why we built vJailbreak, talk a little bit about sort of how it works and what it does, and then hopefully jump into a demo and then share a little bit about our roadmap. And if people want to, obviously it's open source, people can jump in and contribute as well. So over the past sort of 24 months, I'm sure everyone's sort of seen a lot of news and fears about what is happening with Broadcom's acquisition of VMware. What we're seeing in the industry is a lot of companies that are saying, that's it, we've done. We've either got 18 months, 24 months left, or we just signed a 3-year renewal last year and we're never renewing again. And we're talking with people that have got 10 hypervisor nodes all the way through to like 40 and 80,000 cores where they've just said, we're done. Their biggest challenge isn't just selecting a new hypervisor to land onto, it's the actual act of migration. So we sort of assessed the market and looked at what was there and sort of said, is this going to work for what a VMware administrator wants? Right? They're probably not going to love command line interfaces. That's just not what VMware users have had to use in the past. And we're trying to make sure that what we deliver to market is simple. So we looked at Vert V2V and said, look, this is an awesome piece of technology. How can we build upon it and make it easier, more scalable? Touching on the challenges that we're seeing, which is really scale, simplicity, making sure that once the VM is migrated, that it's in a state that it can just be used. And hopefully our demo today, if it runs quickly, we'll be able to highlight that. But these are sort of the design principles that these are really the design principles that we've been targeting, right? Is how do we get something that's open source that anyone can use, right? How do we make it easy to adopt for a VMware administrator? And then how do we make sure it's hitting on the points that enterprises want during a migration? So that's moving the data, doing it live, transforming that hypervisor, the image format at the end, making sure all the drivers are up to date and stuff like that. So I'm going to hand over to Pooja to talk a little bit about what vJailbreak is, and then we'll get to a demo not too quickly.
Hi all, good morning. So my name is Pooja Ghumre. I'll be talking about what the vJailbreak tool is. So thanks Chris for introducing what the challenges are today with migrating from VMware to OpenStack. And I'm just going to talk more about how the tool is built. So it's an open source repo, platform 9/vJailbreak that you can check out on GitHub. And you can also check out like the roadmap for the project out there. So it's built using open source tools for NBDKit and Vert V2V. Essentially, we're trying to leverage what's out there, but then also make it very simple to use, very intuitive for anybody new who comes in from a VMware world and is trying to kind of migrate to OpenStack. And the USP is also kind of being able to provide like a very easy to use user interface, like a graphical web UI that people can go into and get started without really delving much into the details of OpenStack and how it works and all of that. So that's the end vision for it. We're also trying to kind of simplify the discovery process of all the assets from VMware. So if you can easily discover all the VMs that are running in your vCenter environment and then just be able to say like a point click and then migrate these whatever 1,000 or 2,000 VMs in a specific schedule that you can configure up front. That's the goal. And as part of doing that, once you have set up your OpenStack control plane, we basically allow you to kind of provide a mapping of your existing physical infrastructure, be it your storage infra or networking infra, and kind of map that to the OpenStack side of things. So every data store that you have in vCenter or every network that you have in a vCenter, you can essentially map that to an OpenStack environment as well. The admin is also kind of given the flexibility of configuring a schedule around what the VM migration should be, when the VM migration should be triggered, and depending on your applications running there, you can configure that. Some of the highlights of the vJailbreak tool. So it's essentially giving you a cloud-native API of dealing with it. So it's a Kubernetes-style API that you can use to define different custom resources, and that allows you to kind of have a very easy and deterministic way of scheduling migrations. It's a very flexible tool in the sense, depending on your application, you can either opt for a warm migration, which is essentially like a near live migration, but not like completely live. And then there's also an option for cold VM migrations, where if your application can kind of sustain some sort of downtime while the transition happens from VMware to OpenStack, you could opt for that as well. When you're scheduling migrations, I'll show in the demo as well that you can configure a specific cutover window when you can say what the time is for migrating your copy, data copy versus the actual power off that happens on the vCenter environment, and allows you to kind of cut over to the OpenStack VM. As part of the migration, you also kind of get to preserve the IP addresses or MAC addresses of your virtual machines. So in case you have some Oracle licensing or any sort of licensing that's tied to the hardware MAC address of your VMs, then you can kind of configure that so that it's preserved and your application does not really see that kind of transition. To make sure that after the migration is done, your application is actually healthy and running fine, you can configure certain health status like checks. So it could be something as simple as like a URL endpoint that you can point it to, and if you make like a REST API call against it, if you're able to get a successful response, that kind of guarantees that your migration is successful. Or you could also supply like a TCP IP and like a TCP port number that you can use to kind of ping that application on a specific port. When a migration happens on a VM, we also take care of kind of doing any sort of driver updates. So depending on whether it's a Windows or a Linux VM, you may need like certain storage or networking device driver updates. So we take care of that, and it also kind of uninstalls your VMware guest agent and kind of replaces it with the KVM or QEMU equivalent. As part of doing a warm migration, essentially we rely on the change block tracking API that VMware or vCenter offers, that allows us to look at what are the incremental updates that are happening to a VM, so that you can do like an initial full copy of the VM disk and then kind of rely on the change block tracking to give you just incremental updates, so that it's kind of allowing you to do a block by block transfer at that point. And when the delta is kind of zero, that is the point when you actually power off the VM in the vCenter. When Chris spoke about like the scale of migrations, right? So obviously if you have an existing vCenter environment, you may have thousands of VMs, and it may be a challenge to kind of get that whole environment migrated over to your OpenStack control plane. So the architecture is fundamentally scalable in that you can, the Kubernetes cluster that's running behind the scenes to kind of offer the migration appliance, it can auto-scale or dynamically scale based on how many VMs do you want to like concurrently migrate. So it's very easy to do that. You can just add more capacity to your OpenStack control plane, and it will take care of those parallel migrations for you. In our internal testing so far, we have tested with like 100 concurrent migrations, but you can obviously expand on that number based on the infra available to you. So I spoke about some of these, but in the migration plan that you develop as part of your application infra, you can also kind of define certain dependencies between different VMs that you may have. So if you have a, let's say, a virtual app that has requirements on a like a 2-tier or 3-tier app where you want to migrate certain VMs serially, whereas there may be cases where you want to like parallelly migrate the whole application and want to make sure that it happens as an atomic transition. In that case, we allow you to kind of specify that, so you could do like a serial or parallel migration. The cutover window is what I spoke about earlier, that you can kind of define a maintenance window sort of where the application may experience certain downtime because of the transition from VMware to OpenStack. But we also give the user the control that if you don't want to kind of have a downtime beyond a certain window, then you can actually fail and retry that migration at a later date. So it gives the admin that flexibility that in case because it's a warm migration and you cannot predict how long the migration might take in some cases in terms of if there's a high activity in terms of I/O that's happening inside the VM, you can choose to kind of retry the migration at a later date. Post-migration, as part of the tool, you should be able to see the different phases that it goes through for the migration. So after the actual data copy has been done, it does use, again, open source tools to kind of do the disk conversion from the VMDK format that VMware has to the QCOW2 format, which is QEMU compatible. And like I said, it does the uninstall of the VMware tools for you and kind of installs a QEMU guest agent, which will give you the same kind of functionality. There's some also like advanced options where you can pre-configure ports in OpenStack if you want to kind of preserve any security group settings or any port level settings on that port. So if it detects that the IP address that you are trying to migrate for a given VM is already present in OpenStack, then it will kind of take care of that for you by reassigning that same port to the VM that gets migrated over. So there are like some options that you can specify for volume types as well as networks if you want to do it beforehand. So we'll go straight into the demo. Chris, if you want to just outline that.
Cool. We thought we'd come up with a little bit more of a creative demo than just like, hey, here's a VM inside of VMware and move it. So I used to be a pre-sales engineer back in the day, and I love to use this application called NOP Commerce. It's a web app that runs on against a database. So we have 2 VMs in VMware running this app. We've pre-installed the vJailbreak vApp inside of OpenStack. What we'll do is we'll show the discovery process. We'll show the replication using change block tracking API that will create the movement and the new instance of the NOP Commerce app server. Obviously, this will go through the conversion process and maintain IP address and everything that Pooja just talked about. Afterwards, the database is, sorry, the app server is shut down. The database remains in VMware, and if time permits, we'll show that the connectivity from the app server is continued over to the database, and that transactions continue to run through. So about as live as you can get. We're going to be showing, obviously, vJailbreak. We're also going to be using our platform that is built on OpenStack called Private Cloud Director, following some of the same design goals as our vJailbreak implementation, is making Private Cloud Director a little bit more familiar and simple for a VMware person. It's all built and founded on top of OpenStack, and I believe we're on the 23.1 release of OpenStack under the covers. So I'm going to hand back to Pooja, and please ask questions. I can run with the microphone if that helps.
Okay, so I'm going to kick off the demo, and then I'll come back to the roadmap slide. Thanks, Chris. For the appliance, I'm just going to show that we have a few VMs that I've already migrated before this. So you'll see there's a completed migration here, but I'll walk through the process of kicking off a new migration. So this is my vCenter environment where I have some VMs running. And like Chris mentioned, we have this Windows 2-tier app, which is an application VM running the NOP Commerce demo app, and there's a database server backing it. Now, I'm going to try and migrate those 2 VMs. So I'll just start with the app VM here. So because I had already migrated it, I'm going to delete that from here. And then you should see that this is my Private Cloud Director web UI, where I can see the vJailbreak VM is running. This is kind of the appliance that kind of kickstarts the migration. And this is the IP that I'm kind of logged into here. So once this migration is recorded, it kind of shows you like success and failure for every VM that you tried. So I'm going to, okay, don't know if it's stuck on this. Let's just open a new one here. So this is where you specify what your source VMware environment is. So in my case, I have like some VMs that are already, some vCenter credentials that are already created, but I can give it a name. I can specify what is my vCenter IP address or DNS name. I can use the data center name here and then supply whatever credentials I have for that vCenter. Similarly, for the OpenStack side, I can specify what the credentials are using a OpenStack RC file. So in this case, I have, again, already supplied those credentials, but if I want, then I can create a new one. I don't know if the network here is not loading. Yeah, it's not detecting that. Yeah, I'm going to see if this is okay. I am on the Wi-Fi.
Fast Wi-Fi, it's not fast.
Should I try switching?
Well, we can revert to we have a video recording.
Okay, I think it's back.
We're going to switch to a pre-recorded video. As you can see, that was working live. Yeah, I tried to do a hotspot off my phone, then realized I was in a concrete bunker. Also did not work. Oh, yeah, literally underground. I wonder what this was built for originally. I'm just here. So far, are there any questions for Pooja or myself?
It does need an OpenStack control plane. So as long as you have that, you can basically, it does use KVM hypervisors, but you can't directly interface with a KVM hypervisor to migrate over. Yeah. But any OpenStack control plane would work.
It'll work on any OpenStack. We haven't done anything to the OpenStack APIs. Yeah, I mean, we don't build anything that relies on anything that we've put on top. Yeah. Have we found anything where it doesn't work? Pooja, what's your experience so far?
Not really. Are you asking in terms of the specific applications where it might? Right. So as of now, I think maybe you can just go to the roadmap slide. I think the only thing that we are currently working on, and as part of roadmap, is the raw device mapping. So RDM support is something we're working on building. Yeah, essentially, yeah, any thing that is supported on the OpenStack control plane already, that should work. But in terms of mappings, then yes, the storage and network mapping, what we have today is what you will have to pre-configure beforehand. But yeah, I think from the roadmap perspective, we have the vision is that you can have an OpenStack control plane sort of bundled in an appliance that you can just deploy on any environment. So you need to like bring up that on a VM, which could be running anywhere. And once that control plane is up, you can just onboard like one hypervisor to kind of bootstrap. And once you have the vJailbreak appliance VM kind of deployed there, that kind of gets you kickstarted, and then you can migrate VMs in batches and then transition over every single ESX hypervisor into a KVM hypervisor. So potentially like also doing like the bare metal provisioning of your hypervisor, right? So as long as you have that first server to get started, you can do like a rolling migration, and the whole VMware cluster can be transformed into an OpenStack cluster that you can just migrate VMs to. And eventually you can just dynamically grow that environment as you feel comfortable with the applications that are getting migrated over. So yeah, that's one of the main things. And then to your point about what's lacking today, I think RDM support is one thing that with physical RDM, there are certain challenges. It's not like as simple as doing it for a regular VMDK. So that's something we're kind of working on, both physical and virtual RDMs. And then, yeah, I think we spoke about the discovery from vCenter and the topology creation. So that's something, again, today we are having to like predefine the mappings and you have to like pre-create a volume type. But if you could discover that as well based on a storage cluster or data store in vCenter and being able to configure that on OpenStack, that's kind of the end goal too, that if we can pre-create those things by just discovering resources, and then once that is done, then it's a very simple mapping for the admin, which they just kind of do like a one-to-one sort of match in that. Yeah.
Video time. Next question.
Sorry, could you please repeat the question? So again, we don't really discover that portion today. So if it's a DVS switch on the vCenter or like a regular switch, as long as you have that network created, so maybe in the demo I can show, right? Like once you have, so this is just showing you the part where you can enter the credentials. Oh. So let me just go to that. The resolution is not great, I think. So whatever VMs you select here, right, like after the VMs are discovered, it will kind of only show you the networks that are on the vCenter that are attached to those specific VMs. So it does not show you the whole inventory. So once you get to that point, under the network and storage mapping, once you have selected that, you should see it will detect what VMware networks, and it does not really tie into what DVS switch you're using in the background. But as long as you can map that to one OpenStack network that again is pre-created on the control plane, you should just be able to proceed with that. Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And then,
basically within OpenStack, you would go and create the network topology that mirrors what you have in VMware.
Right. So yeah, everything here on the OpenStack world will be done as a persistent volume. So it's not really like an ephemeral disk that gets deleted when you delete the VM. And essentially, even in the migration options that we're seeing here, right, like you can essentially go back to the vCenter VM if you have to. So it's just powered off on the source. And then once you have the VM operational on the OpenStack side, you can go back to that and verify things, and only then you can delete it. But every single disk on the OpenStack side is actually a persistent volume.
Yeah, there's some, and this is another thing that I'd be good to share with the community. Coming from VMware to OpenStack, the way that storage works is fairly different. The best approximation is sort of like VMware vVols is what you end up with when you land in the OpenStack world. And we've talked to a lot of companies that are sort of like, wait a second, storage admins kind of like wondering why all these files are showing up when they're used to sort of having like one contiguous blob of VMware storage. Yeah.
So as you can see in the video, right? Like, so it's going through migrations, and then you can see those phases as it's doing it. It will first validate the migration, and then just stay here. And then you'll see that it goes through the data copy phase, and then eventually it will do a disk conversion, and then copy over the drivers, update anything that it needs to, and then switch over to the OpenStack VM. There's also functionality of scaling up the cluster. Let me see if the network is back, maybe. But essentially, yeah, you can also increase the agents that are currently running. So I just started off with a one node cluster to kind of do the migrations, but you can scale it up to what, 1 or 10, up to 10 migrations here, agents here. And once that is done, any migration that you had already scheduled, they'll get placed on different appliance VMs. And then at the end of it, you can also go and see the migration status in the first tab. So I'm just gonna skip through that.
Any other questions from people out in the audience?
Yeah, it's using the NBD kit, so you can actually just match that, basically map the disk, and you can make changes to it, modify anything. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask a question to the people here. Has anyone attempted to do a sort of a VMware to OpenStack or a VMware to anything migration? A couple. How's it going so far? Really? Yeah, I think the first release, we sort of started publicly talking about it in like October. And then I think January we did a little bit more sort of like public press release type work, and this is the first time we're showing it off in public. So kind of excited about it. So people, I really encourage you to just Google vJailbreak. It's probably the only thing that's going to come up when you type that into the internet. There is? Oh, man. I blame marketing. Cool. Anyone else? I think we're at time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully that was informative.
Thank you.